Welcome back to our channel. Hope you are feeling well. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's begin with another day of aviation miracle. The airport buzzed with its usual morning chaos. Engines roared, passengers hurried, and the control tower called out instructions over crackling radios. Amid the commotion, she walked confidently toward the sleek fuselage of the Airbus A330. Her uniform was crisp, her posture steady, but beneath the calm exterior, a storm of doubt had followed her for weeks. She had been grounded, labeled a risk-taker by the airline management. Every careful procedure, every calculated move, scrutinized. Yet here she was once again entrusted with the lives of hundreds. She climbed into the cockpit, her hands tracing the familiar contours of the controls. The cabin hummed beneath her, a quiet anticipation before the violent symphony of engines coming to life. She ran the pre-flight checks meticulously, her eyes scanning every gauge, every indicator. The co-pilot, younger and eager, watched her silently, trusting her expertise even as whispers of her supposed recklessness had circulated among the crew. The runway stretched before them like an endless gray ribbon. Outside, clouds gathered, low and heavy, threatening rain. She adjusted the throttle, feeling the vibrations through the soles of her boots. A shiver ran down her spine, not of fear, but of awareness. She had flown in storms before, but today was different. Something in the air felt off, almost imperceptible. Yet her instincts screamed caution. As the plane surged forward, engines screaming, she pressed her foot firmly against the brake before releasing it with precision. The tires kissed the tarmac, lifting the aircraft slowly, almost gracefully into the morning sky. Passengers pressed against windows, unaware of the storm brewing both inside and outside the cockpit. A flight attendant moved down the aisle, offering smiles, masking the tension they didn't yet feel. Minutes passed. The world below shrank into a patchwork of greens and grays. The city dissolved into distant lights and rooftops. In the cockpit, the instruments glowed with steady hums. Yet her eyes didn't leave the horizon. A slight flicker on one of the displays made her frown. She adjusted the altimeter, double-checked the autopilot settings. Nothing major, yet every pilot knows that intuition is sometimes louder than any instrument. She glanced at the co-pilot. He nodded, his hands resting on the controls, ready but not intruding. Together, they maintained silence, a quiet communication forged over years of training. Outside, the clouds thickened, forming sheets of gray that swallowed the sun. Lightning forked in the distance, illuminating the curves of the aircraft. Thunder followed, rolling across the cabin with a muted vibration. Passengers shivered, some gripping armrests, others whispering prayers under their breath. Her heart rate stayed steady. She had been here before, in situations that could unravel in seconds. But today she was aware of something. Elsa sensed that this flight would test her, more than any before. Every movement of the plane felt alive, almost sentient, responding to the turbulence, the wind, the pull of gravity. The city lights below flickered and vanished behind the storm clouds, leaving only the endless expanse of gray. She adjusted the controls subtly, aligning the plane with a safer trajectory through the storm. The co-pilot followed her lead, trusting every small correction, every flick of her wrist. The passengers continued their routine, unaware of the flight. Attendants moved efficiently, offering drinks and comfort, unaware that the storm was only beginning to reveal its true nature. Suddenly, a shudder ran through the aircraft. Not violent, not alarming yet, but distinct. She noticed a spike in one of the instruments. Carefully, she cross-checked every system. Engine stable, altitude steady, cabin pressure normal. Nothing appeared wrong. Yet the unease lingered. Pilots learned to respect the quiet. Before the storm, the subtle signs that something is amiss. She took a deep breath and glanced at the co-pilot. No words, just a shared glance that conveyed readiness. They had trained for emergencies, memorized every scenario, but instinct was often their truest guide. Beyond the cockpit windows, the clouds churned, lightning illuminating fleeting glimpses of the horizon. Rain began to tap lightly against the windshield, soft at first, then heavier, as though the sky itself was testing them. Time seemed to stretch. Every second became a silent question. Would this routine flight remain just a flight? Or something more? She felt the weight of hundreds of lives not as a burden, but as responsibility. Every choice, every micro-adjustment mattered. The autopilot held steady, but her hands never left the controls, guiding the aircraft with quiet precision. As the plane climbed higher, the storm thickened. Lightning danced closer, rain lashed against the fuselage with increasing intensity. Yet inside the cockpit, she remained calm, collected, focused. This was her element, the delicate dance of human skill and machine reliability. She had been doubted, grounded, labeled risky. But in this moment, all she could do was act, as she always did, precise, patient, and vigilant. Suddenly, the instruments flickered. A warning light blinked, subtle at first, then persistent. She leaned forward, analyzing. The co-pilot watched silently, awaiting instructions. Outside, the storm intensified. Rain pelted the windows. Thunder rumbled with a deep resonance that seemed to shake the very plane. Passengers murmured their concern, rising. The flight attendants exchanged worried glances. Her mind raced calculations. Procedures, protocols, all moving in tandem with the increasing storm outside. She knew that what happened in the next minutes could define the entire flight. Every pilot dreams of the routine, but every true pilot trains for the unexpected. She had faced doubt before, but the question now was not about proving herself. It was about survival. And then, as the storm thickened, a faint vibration ran through the controls. Not catastrophic, but different. Something unusual, something that required immediate focus. She adjusted the throttle slightly, recalibrated altitude, and prepared for what might come next. The aircraft, now slicing through sheets of rain and rolling clouds, seemed almost alive beneath her touch. She could feel the air currents, anticipate the turbulence, guide the plane with skill born of hours in the sky. Yet the storm outside was only beginning to reveal its full fury. And as she stared through the cockpit windows at the dark horizon ahead, she knew one thing with certainty. This flight would not be ordinary. It would demand every ounce of her skill, every bit of her courage, every instinct she had honed over years of flying. The storm awaited, and so did destiny. The storm had swallowed them whole. Raindrops turned to sheets of water, hammering against the fuselage with relentless fury. The Airbus A330 trembled, slicing through turbulent air that seemed determined to tear it apart. The once steady hum of engines now echoed like a heartbeat, strong but uncertain. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was different. Focus had replaced calm. Every light, every sound was magnified, the hiss of the air conditioning, the faint click of switches, the distant murmurs from the cabin. But her eyes stayed locked on the instruments, scanning for something invisible yet imminent. A faint vibration pulsed through the controls, small but distinct. It wasn't turbulence. She knew that rhythm. Years of flying had trained her to feel the aircraft as if it were alive, breathing through the metal and circuits. Something wasn't right. She glanced at the engine parameters. Normal. Then again, a flicker. Not in the data, but in the feeling. The subtle change in pitch, the minor drag in thrust. Her instinct tightened. The co-pilot adjusted his headset, unaware of what she sensed. All stable, he noted in silence, checking his displays. But her gut told another story. She reached forward, disabling the autopilot for a moment, hands gripping the yoke with precision. The aircraft responded sluggishly, a delay she didn't like. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the clouds like cracks of light in a dark ocean. Thunder rolled seconds later, shaking the cockpit. Passengers below gasped quietly as the cabin lights flickered once, then steadied again. She leveled the plane manually, steady but cautious. Rain lashed across the windshield, blurring visibility. The windshield wipers swung rhythmically, cutting through the downpour. The air traffic control's voice crackled faintly through static. But the storm made every word fade and distort. Altitude 31,000 feet, heading stable. Fuel normal. But the unease refused to fade. Then it came a sudden jolt. A sound, sharp and metallic, vibrated through the floor. The aircraft lurched, dipping slightly to the left. Warning tones chimed, first one, then two. A red light blinked. Engine 2, temp high. Her pulse stayed steady, even as adrenaline surged. Her fingers moved across switches with machine-like control. She cross-checked readings, isolating data from the second engine. The temperature was climbing abnormally fast. She commanded a manual check. Seconds later, another sound. This time, deeper. A dull boom echoed from beneath the fuselage. The aircraft shook violently, turbulence mixed with something mechanical. The red light now flashed rapidly. Engine fire detected. Her hands moved instantly, fuel shutoff valve. Engine fire lever, extinguisher armed. The cockpit glowed crimson as the alarm blared. The co-pilot froze for a fraction too long, startled. She didn't need words, her actions spoke. He followed immediately. Flames weren't visible yet, but the readings confirmed it, an engine fire mid-flight. 200 lives now rested on her calm. Inside the cabin, passengers felt the tremor. A few gasped as a low vibration traveled through the floor. The flight attendants steadied themselves, masking fear with professional calm. One of them, eyes wide, exchanged a silent glance with another. They knew something serious had begun. She executed the emergency. Checklist mentally, every action, drilled into muscle memory. Her breathing stayed even, but her heart beat faster. The storm outside offered no mercy. Thunder roared again, lightning illuminating the cockpit like a flash of red and white chaos. Engine fire suppression engaged. She waited. Seconds crawled by. The light blinked, still red. She activated the second extinguisher. Another flash. The indicator flickered once, then steadied fire out. But the engine was gone, dead. The aircraft now flew on one engine, wounded, but still airborne. She reduced thrust, stabilizing altitude. The co-pilot began calculating emergency landing routes, but their position was over open ocean, and the nearest diversion airport was hundreds of miles away. She adjusted the aircraft's pitch slightly, preserving altitude while compensating for lost thrust. The control yoke resisted heavier now, every correction requiring effort. Yet she handled it with calm precision, as though her hands were extensions of the aircraft itself. In the cabin, a baby cried softly. A man clutched the armrest, whispering something under his breath. The flight attendants moved down the aisle, steady but pale. No announcement yet, not until she was sure they could handle it. Then came another flicker on the display. Fuel flow irregularities minor but concerning. Her jaw tightened. Every small issue now carried weight. One engine gone, one storm raging, and hundreds of hearts waiting unknowingly for her next move. She reached for the radio, attempting contact again. Static. Nothing. The storm was interfering with transmission. They were for now on their own. Lightning flared again, close enough to illuminate her reflection in the glass composed. Unwavering yet aware of the magnitude of what lay ahead. The co-pilot kept monitoring systems, hands trembling slightly as he noted readings. But her calm spread through the cockpit like gravity quiet. Commanding, unbreakable. The storm might rage, but she remained its still center. Minutes passed like hours. The turbulence worsened. Rain lashed harder. The clouds thickened, hiding any glimpse of stars or horizon. The world outside was just noise and chaos, but inside, the cockpit remained a battlefield of focus and instinct. She made her decision. The only way to save everyone was to descend carefully. Through the worst of the storm, toward clearer air where they could communicate again. It was risky. But staying high in the turbulence with one dead engine was riskier. She adjusted the controls, beginning a slow descent. The plane dipped slightly, its body rattling in protest. The co-pilot checked airspeed, his eyes wide as the altimeter needle moved downward. The cabin lights flickered again. Gasps rippled through the passengers. The baby cried louder now. Yet through it all, the plane held steady. Because she held steady. She focused on the horizon, invisible through the storm, and whispered a silent thought. Not fear, not doubt, but resolve. The kind only true aviators know. Not today. Not on my flight. The aircraft sliced through the storm, descending slowly into darkness and rain. The alarms had gone silent. The danger hadn't, but in her hands, hope still lived. And as the first faint signal reappeared on the radio, crackling through static, she knew the real test was yet to come. Darkness surrounded the aircraft like an ocean of storm clouds. The Airbus A330 descended through layers of rain and wind, its fuselage trembling with every gust. The storm was merciless, roaring winds slammed against the wings. Lightning split the sky in bursts of blinding white. Inside the cockpit, time had lost its meaning. The fire alarm had gone silent, but the memory of its red glow still burned behind her eyes. The right engine was dead, feathered and silent. The left engine roared on alone, strained but holding. She had already decided to descend. It was the only way to stabilize fuel, regain signal, and hopefully contact air traffic control. But every 1,000 feet they dropped, the turbulence grew worse. The storm wasn't done yet. Rain lashed across the windshield, the wipers swinging wildly, barely keeping up. Lightning flashed, and for an instant, she saw the faint outline of ocean far below, dark and endless. They were somewhere between continents, surrounded by nothing but clouds and chaos. The radio crackled. For the first time in 30 minutes, a faint voice broke through static, unrecognizable, fragmented. She adjusted frequency, tried again. Nothing, just static. The co-pilot tapped the receiver, frustration etched across his face. They exchanged a look, not panic, just acknowledgement. They were still on their own. She steadied the yoke. Every movement was heavier now, the controls sluggish in the dense, wet air. The plane pitched slightly to the left, the single engine fighting the wind's push. She corrected manually, hands firm, her breathing measured. The cockpit was alive with faint red and amber warnings, not catastrophic, but constant reminders that the aircraft was wounded. Yet, through the chaos, she was calm. Years of discipline and instinct had reduced everything to a rhythm. Monitor. Adjust, stabilize. In the cabin, lights flickered again. Passengers murmured prayers, clutching hands, whispering names of loved ones. A flight attendant knelt beside a frightened child, offering a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The baby who had been crying earlier now slept in its mother's arms, innocence oblivious to the storm outside. The aircraft shuddered again, a pocket of turbulence so strong that overhead bins rattled. The co-pilot flinched. She didn't. Her eyes stayed fixed on the artificial horizon. The altimeter spun slowly downward 23,000 feet, then 21. A streak of lightning illuminated her face, half bathed in red emergency glow, half in cold blue light from outside. It made her look like two people at once, the disciplined pilot and the human being quietly, bearing the weight of 200 souls. Fuel. Consumption had stabilized. Engine readings steady. Fire contained. But then came another problem. A small chime. Then another. The hydraulic pressure warning blinked faint. Amber, uncertain, her jaw tightened. Hydraulics controlled their flaps and brakes. Any failure here could make descent and later landing nearly impossible. She scanned the systems, isolated the cause. It wasn't total failure. But one of the auxiliary pumps was losing pressure. They needed to reach lower altitude fast, smoother air. Clearer communication. She began a controlled descent to 18,000 feet. The storm fought back. Wind slammed the aircraft sideways. The wings flexed violently under stress. Passengers screamed as the plane dropped suddenly, only to steady again under her control. Inside the cockpit, silence. No words, just breathing, just work. She adjusted trim, balanced thrust, and rerouted hydraulic pressure manually, an almost impossible task mid-storm. Yet her hands moved like memory, eyes flicking between systems and sky. Then the radio flickered alive again. 30, do you read? Static. She leaned forward, adjusting frequencies. Confirm position, heavy turbulence in sector. She recognized the pattern. It was ground control trying to locate them, but the signal was cutting in and out. They were too low, too far, and the storm too dense. Still, it was hope. The co-pilot tried to respond. Nothing. Silence swallowed the cockpit again. She didn't let frustration show. Instead, she checked coordinates. A faint blip appeared on navigation, a possible airstrip, hundreds of miles ahead, beyond the storm's reach. It wasn't a major airport. It was a remote emergency strip used by cargo planes in rare situations. But it was their only chance. She pointed to it. The co-pilot nodded immediately. Together, they began to reprogram. Navigation manually, fighting static and turbulence while the aircraft shook around them. Below, clouds opened briefly, revealing a flash of moonlight on endless water. It reminded her of something she had always believed. Every pilot faces a moment where skill ends and courage begins. They had just reached that moment. The storm's core surrounded them, rain like needles, thunder like cannon fire. The aircraft felt smaller, fragile, as though the elements could consume it any second. Yet through that chaos she remained still, eyes sharp, hands unyielding. A warning tone blared again, stall caution. The left engine was struggling, its power output dipping momentarily as wind gusts disrupted airflow. She adjusted pitch immediately, reducing drag, balancing speed. Every second counted. The co-pilot wiped sweat from his brow, his expression pale but steady. They both knew one mistake now, and the plane wouldn't recover. And then, silence. Not peace, just a brief lull. The storm suddenly calmed, as if holding its breath. Through a thinning break in the clouds, the faint outline of a coastline appeared far ahead. Her heart skipped once. Land. Not safety yet, but direction. The radio hissed again, this time clearer. "Flight 237, we have you on radar. Confirm your situation." Relief flooded the cockpit, but only for a second. Before she could respond, the aircraft jolted violently once more. A deafening bang echoed from beneath, not the engine this time, but the landing gear compartment. The co-pilot's hand shot to the alarm panel. "QID pressure critical." Her eyes narrowed. No panic, no hesitation. Only decisions. The aircraft was now descending toward the edge of the storm, wounded and heavy, hydraulics failing. Land was visible but far. They had to glide, manage pressure, keep altitude, and hope the systems held long enough. Her hands tightened on the controls. The co-pilot watched her. He knew she wasn't just flying a plane anymore. She was carrying 200 lives through the edge of nature's wrath. The clouds began to thin. The ocean below reflected faint glimmers of lightning and moonlight. Ahead, through mist and rain, a distant strip of runway lights flickered, faint, almost unreal. Hope. But as they began their final descent path, one last alarm blinked to life: flap system failure. She stared at it, unblinking. The landing ahead would not be normal. It would be the most dangerous landing of her life. And this time, no simulator, no manual, could prepare her for what came next. The coastline stretched below like a faint promise of safety. Distant, uncertain, and fading in and out behind sheets of rain. The storm hadn't let go entirely. Winds still pushed against the wounded Airbus, testing its strength with every mile. Inside the cockpit, the alarms had quieted. But tension filled the air heavier than thunder. The flap system had failed. That meant the aircraft couldn't slow down properly for landing. The hydraulics were barely holding, one engine gone. And yet the plane still flew, steady under her hands. Every control input now felt like lifting weight underwater, sluggish, delayed. But her focus never broke. She had flown thousands of hours, yet none like this. Every ounce of experience she had ever earned, every mistake, every lesson, all converged in this single flight. The co-pilot read her movements, anticipating each correction without needing words. Together they fought the wind like two soldiers in a battle no one else could see. The distant runway lights grew clearer now, faint yellow beacons through the mist. Blinking through the rain, the emergency strip was short and narrow, surrounded by dark forest and uneven terrain. But it was their only option. The aircraft descended lower. The storm thinned, replaced by heavy drizzle. Wind gusts still struck from the side, shaking the wings. Lightning flashed one last time on the horizon, as if the sky itself was watching. She recalculated speed too high, flaps unresponsive. They would have to land fast and perfectly straight. Any mistake, and the aircraft could overrun. Or worse, break apart on touchdown. In the cabin, passengers clutched each other silently. Some cried softly. Others stared ahead, unable to pray anymore. The flight attendants moved down the aisle one last time, fastening loose seat belts, steadying shaking hands. The baby that had cried earlier now slept peacefully, as if unaware that life hung in a balance of seconds. Altitude, 2,000 feet. The altimeter's numbers fell slowly. The co-pilot's hand hovered near the emergency brake lever, their last resort. She checked everything once more. Engine thrust, fuel, pressure, airspeed. The aircraft felt heavy, but alive, following her guidance with fragile trust. She had flown it into the storm. Now she would fly it out. The runway lights shone brighter now, just ahead, emerging from fog. She lined up perfectly. One chance. No second tries. The wind shifted. A strong crosswind slammed into the left side, pushing the nose slightly off course. She corrected instantly, a tiny input on the rudder, a precise adjustment of thrust. The plane obeyed. Altitude, 1,000 feet. Speed high. No flaps, no margin for error. The co-pilot glanced at her, eyes wide. She didn't look back. Her world had narrowed to the horizon and the instruments, glowing before her, every light, every vibration part of a single living rhythm. 500 feet, the runway fully visible now. Rain swept across the asphalt in glistening streams. She brought the throttle back slightly, balancing the aircraft's descent. The wind howled again, one final gust that lifted the right wing slightly. She countered, steady and sure. The aircraft sliced through the final layer of cloud and broke into open air. Runway dead ahead. Her jaw set. Her hands tightened. The wheels touched down hard. The impact jolted through every seat, every heart. Sparks erupted briefly as the tires met the slick runway, water splashing high around them. The plane bounced once, then slammed down again. The roar of reverse thrust filled the air, one engine working overtime, screaming in protest. The emergency brakes engaged. The runway lights raced by in a blur. For a long, breathless moment, it felt like the plane wouldn't stop. The end of the strip rushed closer, dark trees waiting beyond. And then a slow, trembling stillness. The aircraft shuddered once and stopped. Silence. No thunder, no alarms. Just the faint hum of rain on metal. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then applause. Soft at first, then louder until it filled the cabin like a wave. Tears streamed down faces. Flight attendants hugged passengers. The co-pilot let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. She sat still, staring at the motionless runway lights through the windshield. The storm clouds broke behind them, revealing a pale dawn sunlight piercing through gray, painting the wet tarmac gold. She removed her hands from the controls slowly. They trembled now, but only from exhaustion. She looked at the faint rainbow forming through the mist ahead, fragile. Fleeting but real. She had been called reckless once. Grounded for flying with too much instinct. But today, that same instinct had saved 200 lives. Rescue trucks raced toward the aircraft. Flashing lights reflected in puddles on the runway. The crew began evacuation procedures, calm and efficient. Yet for her, the noise faded away. All she could hear was the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat, and the quiet voice inside that whispered what she had always known. True flying isn't about perfection. It's about belief in yourself, in your machine, and in the lives behind you. As she stepped out of the cockpit into the light rain, a faint smile crossed her face. Not triumph, not pride, just gratitude. The storm had tested her, but hope had carried her through, and somewhere above, as sunlight broke the clouds, it felt almost as if the sky itself was saluting her, the pilot who refused to give up.